A young couple vanished just hours after their wedding in 1985. No goodbye, no signs of struggle. It was as if they had driven straight off the face of the earth in their brand new yellow Thunderbird. For over a decade, their case remained a mystery. But then, 12 years later, a group of university students analyzing archived satellite images spotted something strange deep in the Everglades, a discovery that would unravel a haunting truth no one had ever expected. That morning, the Florida sun was rising over a homestead parking lot. Linda Carroll, now 56, moved through the produce aisle of her local supermarket with quiet focus, selecting tomatoes, checking lettuce. She did this every week, a routine that helped her get through the days since the summer of 1985, when her only daughter vanished without a trace. As she reached for a bag of oranges, her cell phone rang sharply, a recent gift from a grocery store giveaway, one she still wasn't used to. Startled, she fumbled for it. "Hello? Mrs. Carroll? This is Detective Jason Pram with the Homestead Police Department. I need to ask where you are right now." Her stomach turned. Over the past 12 years, she'd received dozens of calls like this, tips that led nowhere, updates that weren't updates at all. But something in the detective's voice made her grip the phone tighter. "I'm at Walmart," she said slowly. "Why? What's going on?" "We need you to come to Everglades National Park. There's been a development. It's about your daughter Melissa and her husband Brandon. Something's been found." The air seemed to leave Linda's lungs. What do you mean something's been found?" "We've recovered a vehicle, a yellow Ford Thunderbird, from a remote part of the park. We need someone to confirm the identification. The Whitmore family is being contacted as well. Can you meet us near Main Park Road?" The color drained from her face. "The car?" Her voice broke. "After all these years?" "I understand it's a lot. We'll walk you through everything." Without hesitation, Linda left her shopping cart in the middle of the aisle. She barely noticed the people staring as she rushed out of the store, climbed into her old Honda Civic, and sped off toward the Everglades. That 20-minute drive stretched and collapsed at the same time. Memories came flooding back, memories she'd spent years trying to contain. The police had once told her Melissa likely left on her own, newly married and ready for a new life. But Linda had never believed that. Not deep down, not really. Her daughter wouldn't just vanish like that, not without a word. Now, after all this time, that fragile version of closure she'd tried to accept shattered completely. When she arrived at the park, the scene took her breath away. Police cruisers, flashing lights, rescue vehicles. It was all there. Officers marked off the area with yellow tape as park rangers guided traffic. Linda parked and stepped out on shaking legs. Tourists, rangers, and officers gathered near the center of it all, and there, on a flatbed trailer, sat the yellow Thunderbird. It looked like a ghost from the past. Mud streaked down its sides. Algae clung to its frame. Murky water still dripped from beneath it, and yet she knew it instantly. This was the same car Melissa and Brandon had driven away in on their wedding day, a gift from Brandon's father, who had made such a show of it, posing for pictures with the Newlyweds beside it. "Mrs. Carroll?" A man approached. It was Detective Pram, a little younger than she expected, with the tired eyes of someone who's seen too much. She couldn't take her eyes off the car. How did you find it?" "I think you should hear it directly from the people who made the discovery." He led her to a small group wearing University of Miami shirts. They looked barely older than Melissa had been when she disappeared. A student with sandy hair and sincere eyes stepped forward. "Mrs. Carroll, I'm Jake Morrison. We're working on an environmental project, studying how the Everglades landscape has changed over the past few decades. We were analyzing satellite images from the mid-'80s when we noticed something that didn't belong." He showed her a folder with a printed satellite photo. This was taken in 1985. When we enhanced the image, we spotted a yellow shape that appeared to be partially submerged. Our professor remembered the missing persons case from that year. It had been major news. We matched the coordinates and reached out to the authorities. Detective Pram gently picked up from there. Once we confirmed the image, our team went in. What we found was the car. Linda couldn't speak. Everything in her had frozen. The truth she'd waited 12 years to uncover was finally surfacing. And it was just the beginning. What the students had found was so far off the beaten path, it was no wonder no one had ever come across it before. The section of the Everglades where the Thunderbird was located was remote, difficult to access, and deep enough for a car to vanish completely beneath the surface. Over the years, the water had claimed it, burying it in layers of sediment and silence. The recovery took almost 4 hours, Detective Pram continued. We brought in sonar, divers, and worked alongside Florida Fish and Wildlife. Once we confirmed the car's location, a helicopter airlifted it out and placed it here, for all of us to see. Before Linda could respond, she heard car doors slamming nearby. She turned and instantly recognized the Whitmores. Gregory still had that same self-important stride despite the gray in his hair. Eleanor followed behind with her usual cold composure, and their son Daniel trailed last, quieter, eyes scanning the scene. The sight of them stirred something sharp in Linda. She remembered their last conversation all too well. Gregory blaming Melissa, insinuating that his son had been somehow dragged down by a girl from a working-class background, as if love had a price tag. Detective Pram walked over to speak with the Whitmores. Linda kept her distance, but she could hear Gregory's voice cutting through the noise. "Yes," he said firmly, "that's the Thunderbird I gave Brandon as a wedding present. FTB 1985. I paid extra for the custom plate." Against her better judgment, Linda stepped closer. "What did you find inside?" she asked. Detective Pram's face grew more serious. There were no remains, no signs of violence that we could detect, though the water damage makes it hard to tell. The only item recovered was this. An officer stepped forward with a sealed evidence bag containing a silver lighter. Gregory immediately pulled a matching one from his pocket. "This one's mine," he said. "We bought them as a set. Christmas '84. Brandon's had to be in the car." Eleanor's tight composure finally slipped. If they weren't in the car, where are they? What happens now? "This changes everything," the detective said gently. "We don't believe Brandon and Melissa drove that car into the Everglades on their own. Someone put it there to make it disappear, and that means this case is no longer just about missing persons." "You think this was intentional?" Eleanor asked, visibly shaken. "That someone might have done something to them?" "We're considering all possibilities," Pram replied. "But whoever left that vehicle out there knew the terrain. They chose that location for a reason. That tells us it was someone local, someone who understood how to make something disappear." Gregory's face flushed. "Before you waste time on conspiracy theories, send your divers back. Search the area again. They could still be out there." "We've already resumed the dive," the detective said calmly. "And we're expanding the grid." Then Gregory turned sharply to Daniel, not bothering to lower his voice. "This is why you never marry below your station. Girls like that ruin lives and reputations. Just look at what happened to your brother." Daniel looked stunned. "You know Brandon loved her. Don't say that." That was the moment Linda snapped. "Are you seriously blaming my daughter after all this time?" Gregory turned to her with disdain. Maybe it wasn't her, but someone from her past. Those neighborhoods, they're full of trouble. Maybe an old boyfriend got jealous. Maybe someone wanted your daughter gone. "My daughter sang in the church choir," Linda shot back. "She volunteered. If she wanted your son's money, she would have stayed behind to fight for it. But she didn't. She left with him, because they were in love." Gregory stepped forward. "Your daughter pressured mine into rushing the marriage. She broke his focus, his future. Don't rewrite history." "You mean your son pressured her?" Linda said, her voice trembling with emotion. She wanted to wait. He didn't. The argument quickly spiraled. Voices rose. Onlookers gathered. Officers stepped in to create space between the two families as the tension threatened to erupt. "That's enough," Detective Pram said, stepping between them with authority. "No more. This helps no one." He gently guided Linda aside. "I understand how raw this is, but we need to stay focused. You're not alone in this." "He's trying to make my daughter look like the villain," Linda said through clenched teeth, her hands shaking. "My Melissa, who gave everything, who loved him." "I know," the detective said gently. "We'll go through all the evidence again. Right now, you need to get some rest. We'll call you the moment anything changes. Do you feel okay to drive?" I think so," Linda said, trying to collect herself. "I just need a second." She walked back to her car, her steps unsteady, her thoughts spinning. Through the windshield, she saw the Whitmores still clustered around the trailer, Gregory gesturing, commanding attention, still so sure he knew everything, still so sure he was right. But the truth, whatever it was still buried in that swamp, and for the first time in 12 years, they were finally starting to dig. Back home, Linda stepped inside to a silence that felt heavier than usual. The adrenaline from the morning had faded, leaving behind only exhaustion and the dull ache of everything left unanswered. She stood quietly in her living room, the reality of the yellow car, the swamp, the confrontation, all of it, finally sinking in. Almost on autopilot, her feet carried her down the hallway. The door at the end had been shut for years. Melissa's room. She hesitated, hand resting on the handle before slowly pushing it open. The hinges creaked. The air inside was stale, thick with dust and memories. Sunlight slanted through faded curtains, illuminating the room just as Melissa had left it in June of 1985. Makeup still scattered across the dresser, a half-finished paperback lying face down on the nightstand. Her favorite sundress draped neatly over the desk chair. But time hadn't been kind. Mold had crept across the closet. The stuffed animals were matted and dull. Even the wallpaper they'd once put up together was peeling at the corners, like old skin. Linda's throat tightened. "Oh, baby girl," she whispered, her voice breaking. She opened the windows, letting the sunlight and fresh air cut through the stillness, then headed to the garage for boxes and cleaning supplies. If the investigation was reopening, they might want Melissa's belongings. And maybe, just maybe, it was time. Not to forget, but to take the first small step forward. She started with the closet, folding each piece with shaking hands. Every shirt and dress was a memory. The outfit Melissa wore to her graduation, the blouse from her first date with Brandon, the skirt she'd saved for all spring. Then, on the top shelf, Linda's hands found something unexpected, things that didn't belong to Melissa at all. A men's watch, a large University of Miami sweater, a cologne bottle, Brandon's things. Her jaw tightened. She'd known, of course, known he'd stayed over sometimes, despite the house rules, despite the values Linda had tried to raise her daughter with. Brandon had been charming, too charming, rich, polished, persuasive, and now he was gone, and her daughter with him. She packed his belongings into a separate box, shirts, cassette tapes, a tennis racket, and a few toiletries, taped it shut, labeled it clearly, Brandon Whitmore, personal items. It took nearly 3 hours to clean and sort. When she was done, Melissa's room still felt like a shrine, but it was at least a clean one. The past still clung to every corner, but it wasn't choking anymore. Linda loaded the box into her car. She didn't want it in the house. Brandon's family should have it. She doubted they'd be home, not after the scene at the park, but someone on their staff could take it. That was all she wanted. The drive to Gables Estates took 20 minutes, the houses growing larger and more perfect with every turn. The Whitmore estate loomed behind tall iron gates, its walls shining in the Florida sun. Linda pulled up, stepped out, and grabbed the box. Before she could even approach the door, Gregory appeared near the garage. His expression darkened the instant he saw her. "What are you doing here?" he barked across the driveway. "You're blocking the gate. I'm leaving, and you need to do the same." "I'm just dropping off Brandon's things," she said calmly, holding the box up. They were in Melissa's room. "Then leave them right there," he snapped, gesturing dismissively to the ground. "Someone will deal with it." She bit her tongue, resisting the urge to throw the box at his feet. Instead, she set it down carefully on the pristine concrete and returned to her car. But as Gregory backed his Mercedes past her, he rolled down his window one last time. "When I get back," he sneered, "I don't want to see you or that rust bucket of yours anywhere near this house. Got it?" And with that, he sped off. Linda sat for a long moment, gripping the wheel, her knuckles white. Through her windshield, she could still see the box, Brandon's belongings, now just another piece of trash left at the edge of a gated mansion. Something about it felt wrong. Wrong to leave it like that. Wrong to let him win. She opened her door again. Box in hand, she marched to the front door and rang the bell. To her surprise, it wasn't staff who answered. It was Daniel. "Mrs. Carroll? I'm sorry to bother you," she said, offering the box. "These are Brandon's. I didn't want to just leave them in the driveway. I thought someone should at least accept them properly." Daniel stepped aside, his voice softer. "Actually, I'm glad you came. Mom and I were just going through Brandon's room. There's something you should see." Linda hesitated. "Your father told me to be gone before he gets back." Daniel's expression darkened. "Yeah, I know. But he's not here right now. Please, come in." "Don't worry about him," Daniel said quietly, and though Linda knew better, she followed him inside. The Whitmore house was even more grand than she remembered. Polished marble floors, high-arched ceilings, and paintings that probably cost more than her entire home. Daniel led her up the curved staircase to Brandon's old room. Eleanor was kneeling beside a half-packed box, her usual cold expression softened, almost gentle. "Linda," she said with a quiet nod, "thank you for bringing Brandon's things." "Of course." Linda set the box down, noticing several others lined up and labeled. "Looks like we had the same idea today." Eleanor gave a faint smile. It felt like the right time, especially after this morning. Linda's eyes drifted to a small box filled with Melissa's things, a hairbrush, a few favorite books, some jewelry. She nodded softly. "I'll take her belongings home with me. Thank you for keeping them." Then Daniel reached across Brandon's desk, picking up a velvet box that looked completely out of place among the dust and grief. "This," he said, "is what we wanted to show you." Linda took the box. It had a heavy, expensive feel. She opened it slowly. Inside, nestled in white satin, was a brand new set of black lace lingerie, untouched and clearly high-end. A small card was tucked into the lid, handwritten in bold strokes. From Otis. "Otis?" Linda looked up, confused. "I don't know anyone by that name. Melissa never mentioned him." "We don't either," Eleanor said. "That's why we wanted your insight. We found it hidden behind Brandon's shoes." For a moment, the room was quiet as they all stared at the delicate gift, each of them thinking the same disturbing question. Who was Otis? And why did Brandon have this? Daniel leaned closer. "It still has the tag, $200. That's a lot, especially in 1985. "If someone else gave this to Melissa," Linda said slowly, "why would Brandon keep it? That doesn't make sense." "Exactly," Eleanor agreed. "Brandon wasn't the kind to keep quiet about something like that. He would have said something. He was, protective. Sometimes too much." Linda shut the box gently. "We need to take this to Detective Pram. It could matter." "I agree," Daniel said. "I'll go with you." I'll stay, Eleanor added quickly. If Gregory comes back, he won't take this well. But he deserves to know, too. They packed the items carefully. Daniel placed the velvet box in a bag, while Linda gathered Melissa's belongings. As they walked toward the garage, Linda couldn't shake the feeling that whoever Otis was, he might be the missing piece in a puzzle that had haunted them all for 12 long years. The Whitmore garage was like a private showroom. Spotless, climate-controlled, with gleaming luxury vehicles lined up in polished bays. Daniel headed toward his BMW, keys already in hand, but just as he reached for the door, they heard it, the growl of Gregory's Mercedes turning into the driveway. Linda's heart sank. He's back. It's fine, Daniel said, but the tightness in his jaw said otherwise. Gregory barely waited for his car to stop before jumping out, face red with fury. What the hell is she still doing here? He shouted across the garage. Daniel, what are you doing with this woman? Dad, calm down, Daniel said. We found something important in Brandon's room. He held up the bag containing the velvet box. You're taking it where? To the media? To drag this family through the mud again? To the police, Daniel said firmly. It could be evidence. Gregory snatched the bag from his son's hands and opened it. When he saw what was inside, his expression changed from anger to confusion to something unreadable. Lingerie? This is what you're calling evidence? Look at the card, Linda cut in. It's signed by someone named Otis. None of us know who that is. And you think that matters? Gregory snapped. You think some name on a gift means anything? Daniel stepped in. We didn't show you earlier because you rushed out. You said you had to get Grandma's medication. I did, Gregory said, patting his pocket. That doesn't explain why you're teaming up with her. No one's teaming up, Daniel sighed. We just want answers. This was hidden in Brandon's closet, and none of us can explain it. Gregory folded his arms. Probably some guy from Melissa's past. Who knows who she was seeing? We're taking it to the station, Daniel said firmly. Let the detectives decide if it's relevant. Fine, Gregory muttered, but I'm coming with you. He pulled out his car keys and held out his hand. Give me your keys. I'm driving. Daniel hesitated, then handed them over. Gregory turned to Linda. You'll follow behind us. Don't expect a ride. This isn't some family road trip. Linda said nothing. She simply nodded and followed them out. At the police station, they were told Detective Pram was still out in the field, overseeing the Everglades search. A younger officer named Martinez took their statement. This will be logged and sealed immediately, he said, slipping on gloves and carefully handling the velvet box. Detective Pram will review it as soon as he returns. What can you do with it? Daniel asked. We'll check it for fingerprints. Fabric's tricky, but we'll try, and we'll also run the name Otis through the database. Homestead isn't that big, and Otis isn't exactly a common name. As Officer Martinez examined the tags on the lingerie, his brow furrowed. This brand, he said slowly, wasn't even sold in the U.S. until late '85. That raises a whole new set of questions. Linda and Daniel exchanged a glance, and just like that, the past started whispering a little louder. This boutique, Eloise, it's in Coral Gables, Officer Martinez noted, examining the label. High-end place. Some of those shops keep detailed client records going back decades. If the purchase was made there, we might be able to trace it. That's helpful, Daniel said. Anything that could lead us to this Otis person. Meanwhile, Gregory's phone kept buzzing. Once, twice, a third time. Each time, he'd glance at the screen, quickly press silence, and shove the phone back in his pocket, his irritation mounting with every buzz. Sir, Officer Martinez said, noticing. Do you need to take that? It's okay. We're wrapping up. It's just work, Gregory said curtly, brushing it off. Daniel frowned. Dad, if it's something urgent, I said it's fine. Gregory cut him off, sharp. They finished the paperwork and left the building. As they stepped into the parking lot, Gregory's phone rang again, loud and insistent. "Oh, for God's sake, Dad," Daniel muttered. "Just answer it. Is it the office?" Gregory hesitated. "Yes. No, it's complicated," he said vaguely. "I have things to take care of. Let's just go." "We still need to finish sorting Brandon's room," Daniel reminded him. "And Mrs. Carroll has Melissa's things to collect." "She can follow us back," Gregory said impatiently. "You'll ride with me." "Actually," Daniel countered, "since you need to go to the office, why don't you take my car? I'll go with Mrs. Carroll, and we'll finish up while you handle whatever you need to." Gregory's phone buzzed again. This time, Linda happened to glance over. The screen showed a number, not a name. No contact saved. He declined the call quickly, clearly flustered. As he dug through his pocket for Daniel's car keys, a small keychain fell and hit the pavement with a soft metallic clink. Linda's eyes went straight to it. One key had a small white label, and she was sure she saw the letter O printed at the start. But before she could make out more, Gregory snatched it up fast. "What was that?" Daniel asked, eyebrows raised. "Nothing. Just keys to the office," Gregory said too quickly. "Storage units, files, work stuff." He pocketed the keychain with a tight jaw. "I'll take your car. You two do what you need to do. Just don't take all day." Without waiting, he marched to Daniel's BMW and drove off. Linda and Daniel stood in silence for a moment. "Your father seems tense," Linda said carefully. Daniel exhaled. "He's been like that ever since Brandon disappeared. He throws himself into work, shuts everyone out, snaps at people. My mom says that's just how he processes grief, but honestly, I'm not so sure anymore." He gave a small shrug. "Let's head back." 20 minutes later, Linda pulled into the Whitmore Estates circular driveway. As she slowed to a stop, she noticed someone standing near the garage, a man in a pressed white shirt and dark slacks. "That's Ray Delane," Daniel explained as they got out. "Dad's driver. He's been with us for years. Not always around, but Dad calls him when it's important." Ray approached with a kind smile that immediately put Linda at ease. He looked to be in his 50s, with graying hair and the calm, polite manner of someone who'd seen a lot and judged little. "Mr. Daniel, good to see you," he said warmly, then nodded to Linda. "Ma'am, I'm sorry for everything, truly." "Thank you," Linda replied quietly. There was something grounding about him, a stark contrast to Gregory's constant tension. "Your father asked me to take his car to the office," Ray explained. "He's particular about who touches the Mercedes. You know how he is." Daniel laughed under his breath. "Oh, we all know." Ray smiled and moved toward the driver's side, promising to return the car shortly. Linda and Daniel headed inside. Eleanor was in the living room, standing beside a box. Her posture was tired, and her face showed the weight of the day. "How did it go?" she asked gently. "Fine. I'll explain everything later," Daniel replied. "This is Melissa's?" Linda asked, glancing down. Eleanor nodded. "Clothes, a few books, some photos. They didn't have long to build a life, but I kept what I could." Linda accepted the box, blinking back sudden emotion. "Thank you. Truly." To her surprise, Eleanor stepped forward and hugged her, a quiet, careful gesture. "I'm sorry for Gregory," she whispered, "and for everything, really. We should have supported each other, not blamed. We're both mothers who lost their children. We forgot that." Tears brimmed in her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. "I just hope we get answers soon." Linda nodded. "So do I." Daniel offered to walk her out, but she declined. "Stay with your mom. I can manage." She stepped outside into the afternoon sun, squinting as she carried the box toward her car. Just as she opened the trunk, voices near the gate caught her attention. Ray was talking to someone. A man, younger, stocky, with dark hair and a nervous energy that made him shift his weight from foot to foot. He kept glancing around as if checking to see if anyone was watching. Linda paused, pretending to adjust the box, her ears tuned in. The man leaned in close, speaking low. Ray nodded, but his body language had changed, no longer casual, but guarded. Then the younger man handed Ray a small envelope. Linda turned slightly, trying to see without drawing attention. The man looked familiar, though she couldn't place him. As she stepped into her car and started to reverse, she finally caught a full glimpse of his face, just before he turned and walked away, disappearing around the gate. Her hands tightened on the wheel. She didn't know who he was, but something about him felt wrong, and something told her this story, Melissa's story, wasn't even close to over. He wore a gold chain, bold, heavy, with large letter charms that caught the light just enough for Linda to see them clearly, even from her car. The first letter was unmistakable, O, and she was almost certain the last was an S. Her breath caught. Otis. Her mind raced as she eased her car into reverse. In the rearview mirror, she saw Ray notice it too. He stepped closer to the younger man, said something low but firm, his voice carrying just enough in the breeze for Linda to catch a fragment. Boss said, "Don't wear this." The younger man seemed defensive, muttering something back, but Ray didn't hesitate. With surprising force, he reached out and pulled the chain from around the man's neck, then grabbed his arm, guiding him toward Gregory's Mercedes with the same calm control he'd used minutes earlier. Linda's hands trembled on the steering wheel. Every nerve screamed that something was wrong. The necklace, the name Otis, the sudden urgency. She kept her car moving slowly, acting casual, but watched closely as Ray pushed the young man into the passenger seat and climbed into the driver's side. The Mercedes rolled out of the driveway, not leisurely, not aimlessly. It moved with purpose. Linda made a snap decision. Instead of heading home, she turned the opposite way and followed. Her heart pounded. She wasn't used to this. She'd never followed anyone in her life. She let a few cars slip between them, careful not to get too close, praying she wouldn't lose them at a stoplight or turn. They drove through town, past tidy neighborhoods and local shops, until they entered Homestead's commercial district. The Mercedes turned into a sleek, glass-fronted office building with a large sign out front. Whitmore Industries. Of course. Gregory's real estate development firm. Everyone in town knew the name. Linda pulled into a space across the street behind a delivery truck, partially hidden, engine off. She watched. What was she doing? Following the Whitmores around town like some amateur investigator? She wasn't sure, but that necklace, that name, had triggered something she couldn't ignore. The Mercedes idled for a few minutes. Then Gregory appeared from the building, walking fast, agitated, still in his clothes from the morning, but now constantly checking his watch, his steps clipped with tension. Ray got out as Gregory approached. They exchanged keys. Gregory slipped into his beloved Mercedes without a word, and Ray took Daniel's BMW, which had been left in a reserved space. But the younger man, the one with the necklace, was still in the passenger seat of the Mercedes. He hadn't left. He hadn't even opened his door. Both cars pulled out, the BMW turning left, back toward the Whitmore estate. But Gregory didn't go home. He turned right, south. Linda gave him a few seconds, then followed. She stayed back, letting distance and traffic work in her favor. They passed through the edges of town, houses thinning out until the landscape changed entirely. They were headed toward the Everglades. Her pulse kicked up as the car took the same turn she had made earlier that morning. The entrance to Everglades National Park. Why would Gregory bring this young man here? She let a few tourist vehicles slide between them as they moved through the gate. The sun had started its descent, casting long shadows across the wide-open wetlands. Tourist traffic had thinned, which made following harder, but not impossible. The Mercedes pulled into the parking lot near the Ernest Coe Visitor Center, a spot Linda had seen 100 times on field trips and quiet weekend walks. She parked behind a large RV and watched from a distance. Gregory and the young man stepped out. The young man glanced around, wary. Then Gregory led him toward one of the marked trails. Linda waited a full minute before following, grabbing a park brochure on her way to play the part of a curious visitor. She kept her distance as they moved along the main path. Luckily, there were still a few hikers and photographers on the trail, enough to blend in. For a while, they followed the standard loop. Linda kept them in view, stopping now and then to pretend she was taking bird photos, snapping her camera phone at nothing in particular. But as the trail thinned and the crowds dispersed, the terrain began to change. A wooden sign ahead read, "Long Pine Key Region." The wetlands gave way to rocky limestone ridges dotted with tall pine trees. The elevation rose slightly, the trees cast longer shadows, and in the distance, she could see the shimmer of swamp water stretching out toward the horizon. And then, just when the area had grown quiet enough to raise her anxiety, Gregory and the young man suddenly veered off the trail, onto an unmarked path. Linda froze. No signage, no map reference, just a narrow break in the underbrush where the two men had disappeared. Her heart pounded. Her instincts screamed at her to turn around, to walk away. But something about this felt like a door cracking open, and once you saw behind it, you couldn't pretend anymore. She took a deep breath and followed. Following them meant stepping beyond the safety of well-traveled trails, but Linda had come too far to turn back now. She waited until Gregory and the younger man were nearly out of sight, then slipped onto the narrow, overgrown path. The terrain grew rougher. Jagged limestone jutted from the ground, thick brush snagged at her legs, and the humidity pressed down like a wet blanket. Sweat beaded on her skin. Mosquitoes hovered like a living cloud. After 20 minutes of grueling silence, she heard voices ahead. She slowed her pace, crouched low, and crept forward, using a thicket of sawgrass and rocks as cover. In a small clearing on higher ground, she saw them. They were alone. No tourists. No trails. Just two men on a dry ridge, deep in the wilderness. Gregory's voice carried clearly. "Point to the exact spot. I need to know precisely where you buried her. If the police start sniffing around, I need to be ready." Linda's breath caught in her throat. Otis walked a few steps and gestured toward a patch of dense undergrowth. "Here, right here, 6 feet down, just like you told me. The limestone made it tough, but the tools you gave us worked." Us. That word hit like a punch. There was more than one. Melissa hadn't just vanished. She'd been buried, deliberately, silently. Gregory nodded, eyes scanning the ground with cold calculation. "Good. Leave it untouched. No one's finding this unless they know exactly where to look." Otis's voice shifted. "What about me? You said you'd help me. I messed up, I know, but you told me to send that gift. You said it would stir things up." Gregory snapped. "You used your real name, genius. Of course Brandon kept the card. You were supposed to get close, make him jealous, not leave evidence." Otis backed up slightly. "But it worked, didn't it? That fight, the way he acted after—" Gregory held up a hand, silencing him. "Two choices. One, disappear. Leave Florida tonight. I won't give you a cent, but you'll be free. Or two, take the fall. Go to the police. Say you were obsessed with Melissa. Tell them you killed both of them. Sink the car. Cover the trail. You'll give the families closure. I'll pay you $300,000. Offshore. For your family while you're inside. But you never speak my name again." Otis was shaking. "You want me to confess to murder? I have contacts. You won't serve long, and you'll be rich when you come out. It's your choice. Be forgotten, or be useful." Silence hung in the humid air. Then Otis nodded. "Okay, I'll do it, for the money." Gregory gave a grim smile. "Smart choice. Now let's go. It's getting late." They turned and started walking back. Linda didn't move, couldn't move. She stayed hidden until their footsteps faded down the trail. Only then did she reach for her phone with trembling hands. Just 2 bars. It would have to be enough. She called Detective Pram. The line was filled with static, but it rang. "Detective, It's Linda Carroll. I'm in the Everglades, Long Pine Key area. I followed Gregory Whitmore. He's with a man named Otis. I heard everything. They buried Melissa here. Gregory's trying to pay him to confess. A pause. Then Pram's voice, tight and serious. Mrs. Carroll, that was incredibly dangerous. I need your exact location. Stay hidden. We're sending units now. She described the trail, the markers, the terrain. They're heading back. Please hurry. The line went dead. She stared at her phone, then at the clearing. At that spot, the place Otis had pointed to so casually, where Melissa had been hidden for 12 years. Tears spilled down her cheeks. The truth, awful as it was, had finally broken the surface. She turned and began moving back through the wilderness. Her legs shook with every step. She was exhausted, but she couldn't stop now, not when the end was this close. The late afternoon sun slanted through the tall pines, casting long shadows. Every rustle made her flinch. Every footstep behind her might be Gregory or Otis. By the time she reached the main trail, only a handful of hikers remained. She blended in, walking stiffly, forcing her breathing to stay calm. And then, finally, the parking lot. She nearly sobbed with relief. But something had changed. Police cruisers filled the lot. Lights flashed red and blue across the asphalt. Rangers directed traffic. Officers moved quickly, securing the perimeter. The world had finally caught up to the truth Linda had carried alone for too long. Yellow tape now cordoned off the visitor center. Park rangers directed tourists away, urging them toward alternate exits. The parking lot, once filled with families and hikers, had transformed into a controlled police scene. At the center of it all, Linda spotted Otis, seated on the curb in handcuffs, an officer standing watch beside him. Not far away, Gregory stood next to his Mercedes, animated and agitated, waving his arms as he argued with Detective Pram and two uniformed officers. His face was red, his composure unraveling. Linda didn't hesitate. She moved quickly across the lot, her steps sharp with purpose. Detective Pram saw her coming and stepped forward to stop her, but she raised her voice, pushing past him. "He's lying to you," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Whatever he's telling you, it's a lie." Gregory turned. His eyes found her. His expression shifted in an instant, from performative outrage to something darker. "This woman has been stalking me," he shouted. "She followed me from my house. I demand she be arrested for harassment." Linda didn't flinch. "I saw Ray Duane with Otis at the Whitmore house," she said, pointing at the younger man on the curb. "He took a necklace from him. It had the letters O and S. He told him the boss didn't want him wearing it." Gregory's voice cracked. "She's delusional, obsessed with her grief. She's been attacking my family for over a decade." "I followed them here," Linda continued, ignoring him. "I heard Gregory ask Otis to show him exactly where Melissa was buried. I heard him offer Otis $300,000 to confess to both murders, to protect Gregory's name." Detective Pram's face had grown stone-like. He turned to Gregory slowly. "Mr. Whitmore, those are serious accusations. Accusations from a woman who's never accepted her daughter ran off." Gregory shot back. "I came here today to mourn my son. That man?" He gestured carelessly toward Otis. "A driver, a temp. I don't even know his last name." "You called him Otis," Linda said sharply. "The same name that was on the card in the lingerie box. And he took you to the exact spot. Don't pretend you don't know." Detective Pram glanced between them, then turned to Otis. "Sir?" he said calmly. "What's your name?" Otis's gaze flicked between Gregory and the officers. Sweat dotted his forehead despite the cooling air. His mouth opened, then closed. I want a lawyer." Pram nodded without surprise. "That's your right." Then to his partner, "Detective Morgan, separate them. No one leaves this scene until we get clarity. Take Mrs. Carroll and Mr. Whitmore to different areas. We'll verify everything." He stepped toward Otis again. "You're going to show us what she says you showed Mr. Whitmore. If she's lying, she'll be charged. If she's not..." He let the rest hang. 2 officers guided Otis into a waiting patrol vehicle. Others began pulling equipment from their trunks: evidence bags, field shovels, markers, cameras. A search team was preparing to move out. Linda was led to a bench near the visitor center, an officer remaining nearby. Gregory was escorted to the far end of the parking lot, still loudly protesting, invoking lawyers and rights violations with increasing desperation. The wait felt like hours. The sun dipped lower, painting the landscape with soft oranges and purples. The last light of day was slipping behind the treetops. Then, headlights. Daniel's BMW pulled into the lot. Eleanor was in the passenger seat. They rushed toward the scene, confusion in their expressions. "Linda, what's happening?" Daniel asked. "We got a call saying Dad was here, that he was being detained." Eleanor's voice cracked with disbelief. Linda took a breath, and then she told them everything. The necklace, the conversation in the woods, the offer of money, Gregory's plan to make Otis the scapegoat, Melissa's burial site. She watched their faces morph from confusion to disbelief to horror. "No," Eleanor whispered, sinking onto the bench beside her. "That's impossible. Gregory would never... He couldn't have..." Daniel stood frozen, arms crossed, jaw clenched, staring across the parking lot at his father. "Actually, Mom," he said quietly, "it makes a terrible kind of sense." Eleanor turned to him, stunned. "Think about it," he said. He hated the idea of Brandon marrying Melissa. He lost it when they eloped. And after they disappeared, he buried himself in work. Never spoke about Brandon unless someone else brought it up first. He shook his head. "That's not how someone grieves. That's how someone hides." They sat in heavy silence. Then, a voice over Detective Pram's radio. Static. Then a short exchange. Pram turned and walked toward them, his face unreadable. "The field team has located human remains in the area Otis identified," he said quietly. "The site is being secured now. Everything will be transported for forensic analysis." Eleanor gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. Linda felt her knees weaken. Daniel steadied her with a hand to her shoulder. Across the lot, Gregory must have heard it too, because he ran. He shoved past the officer guarding him, making for the trees, but Daniel moved first, intercepting him halfway. "Dad, don't." Gregory struggled. "Get out of my way. You don't understand." Daniel's voice was cold now, controlled. "I understand more than you ever wanted me to." Officers converged on Gregory, pulling him back. As they patted him down, something metallic hit the pavement. A key ring. Linda stepped forward. Her eyes went straight to it. There, on one of the tags, in faded black marker, were 3 letters. OIS. Detective Pram picked it up. His jaw tightened. "Bag this. We'll find out exactly what this opens." And just like that, the last mask Gregory Whitmore wore began to fall. Detective Pram held the key between 2 gloved fingers, turning it slowly in the evening light. "Mr. Whitmore?" he said evenly. "Would you care to explain why you're in possession of a key labeled with the name of a man you claim not to know?" Gregory's lips thinned. He said nothing. "Is this connected to your son's remains?" The detective pressed. "Was this your backup plan? Mark the key, shift blame if it ever turned up?" Still, Gregory stayed silent. But then Eleanor stepped forward. Her grief had hardened into something sharper. Fury. "You've been lying to us all this time," she said, her voice shaking. "Where is our son?" She snatched the key from Pram's hand and examined it closely. Her face went pale. This is a key to the family memorial house, she whispered. The columbarium, where we keep the ashes of our loved ones. Detective Pram's partner radioed the field team, receiving immediate clearance. We'll need to investigate that site, he said. Then, turning to Eleanor and Daniel, can you show us where it is? Daniel nodded without hesitation. Of course. He turned to Linda. I'll keep you updated the second we know more. Thank you, she whispered. Eleanor and Daniel left with a small convoy of police cars, disappearing down the road as the field team began returning from the woods, their hands carrying sealed evidence bags. Detective Pram approached Linda. Mrs. Carroll, we'll need you to come to the station. You'll need to give a full statement, and we'll be processing Mr. Whitmore and the other suspect through booking. As Gregory and Otis were read their rights, Otis broke. You still owe me that money, he yelled. We had a deal. Gregory's face twisted with disgust. Not a single cent. You couldn't even follow basic instructions. They were separated and led to different patrol cars. Linda stood slowly, her legs shaky, and fished her keys from her purse. I don't think I can drive, she admitted softly. Pram nodded. That's understandable. Officer Martinez will bring your vehicle in. You can ride with me. She handed over her keys with trembling hands and climbed into the front seat of the detective's cruiser. As they pulled away from Everglades National Park, Linda looked out the window at the vast, wild land that had held her daughter's body in silence for 12 long years. The truth had finally surfaced, dark, twisted, but it was truth, and she could finally stop wondering. The Homestead Police Department was a hive of activity when they arrived. Phones rang, radios crackled, officers moved with quiet urgency through the hallways. The gears of justice, long dormant in this case, were grinding into motion. As Detective Pram led her through the glass doors, Linda caught sight of a familiar face. Ray Delane, Gregory's longtime driver, calm no longer. Now he looked hollowed out, haunted. We picked him up 20 minutes ago, Pram explained. Otis gave us enough during the ride back to secure the arrest. Linda didn't speak. She just watched as Gregory and Otis were booked, photographed, fingerprinted, their belongings cataloged and sealed. Gregory still carried himself like a man untouchable, barking at officers, demanding his lawyer, pretending to be in control. Otis had changed. His bravado had vanished. His shoulders were hunched, his eyes distant. The reality of what he'd done was finally pressing down. Mrs. Carroll, Pram said gently, this way. He guided her into a quiet interview room. The lights were too bright after the fading sunset outside. He offered her coffee, which she declined, and a cup of water, which she accepted. He sat across from her, not as an officer now, but as a man with sorrow in his eyes. First, he said, I want to say how sorry I am. No parent should go through what you've endured. 12 years of silence, and now this. Linda nodded, but the tears were already coming, hot, uncontrollable. Her hands trembled as she wiped them away. At least now I know, she whispered. I spent years wondering if she was still out there, if she was hurt, if she'd been taken, or if she'd chosen to leave me. But now I know. She's not suffering. She hasn't been suffering. Not for a long time. Detective Pram slid a box of tissues across the table. Take your time. When you're ready, we'll go through your statement. And then, I'll tell you what Otis shared on the way back. Linda breathed deeply, wiped her eyes, and nodded. I'm ready. She began from the beginning. The phone call, the car in the Everglades, the confrontation with Gregory, the lingerie, following Ray and Otis, hiding in the brush, hearing the deal unfold. Her voice shook but grew stronger as the truth poured out. Pram took careful notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When she finished, he closed his notebook. Otis Dunhall, he said, was very cooperative once he realized Gregory wasn't going to protect him. He said Gregory hired him in early 1985. Linda frowned. Why? What did he want with my daughter? Pram's face hardened. Gregory wanted to split them up. He didn't want Brandon marrying someone he called unqualified. Otis said Gregory's exact words were, "No poor woman will carry our name." A new surge of grief hit her, mixed with fury. Melissa was better than all of them combined, she said through clenched teeth. She was kind, generous. She didn't care about money or names. She just loved him. Pram nodded. Apparently, Brandon loved her just as fiercely. Otis tried everything, showing up at her work, sending flowers, flirting in front of Brandon. But nothing worked. They were solid, so Gregory changed the plan. Linda's eyes narrowed. Changed it how? Pram met her gaze. He told Otis to create a confrontation, something public, something messy, to make Melissa seem unfaithful. But Brandon didn't fall for it. They stayed together, got married. Linda's voice dropped to a whisper. So they had to disappear. Pram didn't answer. He didn't have to. So they eloped, Linda said softly. Detective Pram nodded. And that's when Gregory's plan turned darker. He explained how Gregory had paid Otis and his father, Ray, to follow Melissa and Brandon to their honeymoon cottage in Dania Beach. The plan was simple, on paper: stage a robbery while Brandon was out, kill Melissa, make it look like a tragic coincidence. But the plan didn't hold. Brandon came back too early, Pram said grimly. Linda felt her breath catch. Her knuckles whitened in her lap. Otis confessed something else, the detective continued. Ray had his own intentions. What was supposed to be quick turned into something far worse. The words came slow, heavy. Ray assaulted her after she was already gone. Then Brandon came back, found them. Linda doubled over. The air punched from her chest. My baby. Oh God. Brandon tried to fight them off, tried to call for help. But once he'd seen too much, they made a decision. Gregory's son was never supposed to die. But once it happened, Gregory made sure the cover-up was total. He had trucks. He had access. A private boat to sink the car far from shore. A cleaning crew to erase the cottage within hours. New bedding. Clean floors. By the time the rental owner arrived, the place looked untouched. No security cameras in 1985. No one asked more than a few questions. And with no bodies, no car, no crime scene, the story collapsed. It was ruled a mystery, Pram said. Some thought they ran off. Others guessed a remote accident. Gregory played the grieving father, and he cremated his own son. He hid the urn under someone else's name, Linda whispered. Under Otis Dunhall, the detective confirmed. What kind of man? The kind who cared more about legacy than truth, Pram said. Linda stared at the wall. Why would he keep Otis and Ray around after that? Otis said they threatened him. If he ever betrayed them, they'd expose the whole thing. It was all or nothing. Either they stayed loyal, or they all went down together. A knock at the door. An officer stepped in. The team's back from the memorial house. They brought the Whitmores. Detective Pram stood. They found Brandon's remains in an urn registered under Otis's name, hidden in a remote section of the memorial house, away from the rest of the Whitmore family. He turned to Linda. I need to speak to Daniel and Mrs. Whitmore now. Would you mind waiting? There may be more forensic updates. I'm sure they'll want to speak with you too. Linda nodded silently and was led to a small waiting room, old magazines, a water cooler humming in the corner. As she passed the main hallway, she caught sight of Eleanor and Daniel. Eleanor looked like she'd aged a decade in a day. Her posture crumpled. Daniel stood beside her, supporting her with one hand. They spotted Linda and came to her. Eleanor reached out and took her hands. "I'm so sorry," she said, "for everything Gregory did to Melissa, to Brandon, to you." Linda shook her head gently. "This happened to all of us. You're victims, too. If I'd known, if I'd ever guessed." Daniel placed a hand on his mother's shoulder. "Mom, don't. You couldn't have known. None of us could." Detective Pram returned. "Mr. Whitmore, we need to speak with you." Daniel gave Linda a reassuring glance. "I'll update you after," he said, and followed the detective. An officer approached. "Ladies, I need to separate you during ongoing interviews. Standard procedure." They were led in opposite directions. Linda entered a smaller room, just 4 chairs and a table. It was quiet, still, and that's when the weight of the day finally crashed over her. She collapsed into a chair, tears spilling freely. For 12 years, she had clung to hope and suffered from doubt. She'd replayed every conversation, every goodbye, every silence. For 12 years, she'd defended her daughter's name, while the world politely suggested she move on. 12 years of birthdays spent alone. Christmas mornings waiting for a call that never came, of second-guessing everything. But now she knew. Melissa hadn't run away. She hadn't been ashamed of her family or her life. She'd been taken, silenced, for daring to love outside her status. She had died terrified, perhaps calling out for her mother, but she had died loved. Brandon had chosen her, fought for her, and died trying to protect her. That love, that quiet, defiant, genuine love, had been real. Not like the suitable match Gregory had tried to force, not a marriage of business and names, but one of hearts. Linda pulled a tissue from her coat pocket and wiped her eyes. The grief wouldn't vanish, not in a day, not in a year. But something inside her had shifted. The wait was over. She could bury her daughter now, could speak to her at a gravesite, could bring flowers, could remember without question. For the first time in 12 years, Linda Carroll could mourn, knowing